on the verge of starvation. She was dying of typhoid.
Emily Hobhouse decided it was her duty to tell the people of Britain exactly what was being done out here in their name. And she spoke plainly. She talked of wholesale cruelty, murder to the children, and a war of extermination. And Emily Hobhouse was proved horribly right. 26,000 Boer women and children died in British concentration camps. 80% of them under the age of 16.
Back in Britain, a powerful anti-war movement was mobilizing. It was led by the Liberal Party's rising star, David Lloyd George, the first British politician to be the subject of a biopic. In December 1901, he was invited to address an anti-war meeting in Birmingham's Town Hall. This was the heart of Joe Chamberlain's political power, and Lloyd George had the Liberal turncoat in his sights.
This was too good an opportunity to miss, but the police told Lloyd George on no account to go to Birmingham. His appearance here would cause a riot. There were people in Birmingham who wanted to kill him. Joe Chamberlain was rubbing his hands with glee. If Lloyd George wants his life, he'd better stay away, he said. And then he twisted the political knife. If he doesn't come, I'll see that everyone knows he's afraid. If he does, he deserves all he gets.
But Lloyd George didn't flinch. On December the 18th, 1901, he boldly stepped onto the stage of the Birmingham Town Hall. But before he could open his mouth, an angry pro-war mob, 30,000 strong, smashed all the town hall windows, broke down the door, and stormed in. 2 men were killed in the crush, many more were injured.
Lloyd George only managed to escape the mob by disguising himself as a policeman, helmet and all, and sneaking out of a side entrance. Back down in London, a vengeful Joe Chamberlain was lurking in his club, waiting for news. When he heard that Lloyd George had escaped, he was bitterly disappointed.
The Boers finally surrendered in May 1902. It had taken 2.5 years, the equivalent of £20 billion, and an army of 250,000 British soldiers to defeat 60,000 Boer farmers.
And so David had given Goliath one heck of a kicking, and there was a massive national crisis of confidence. Then it was revealed that almost half of the men who'd volunteered for South Africa were unfit to fight. They were sick or too weak. Pamphlets began to appear asking, "Can England survive the century?" or "What should England do to be saved?" The British Empire still stood as tall, but perhaps now wobbling a bit on feet of clay.
Perhaps to save ourselves, we'd have to go back to nature. The scientist Francis Galton, a cousin of Charles Darwin's, believed we could breed better Britons. Galton found his inspiration in the Basset Hound Club Rules and Stud Book.
Come on.
He read that each individual puppy inherited its unique set of splodges and colours from its parents. Galton came to the conclusion that our genetic inheritance also dictated our fate, and that nothing could alter it. Not upbringing, not education.
According to Galton, the poorest classes had little or no civic worth or value and no chance of getting better, so they should be discouraged from breeding. Criminals should be segregated and forbidden from reproducing, but the upper and middle classes, brimming with vigour and intelligence and virtue, should be encouraged to have as many children as possible. For Galton, human equality was meaningless.
The ravings of a lone eccentric. Absolutely not. This was an age of science, and Galton was a scientific superstar. Cabinet ministers, bishops, and influential writers, many of them on the left, thought he was the man who could save Britain with his new science of human advancement, eugenics.
George Bernard Shaw, the playwright and Britain's leading public intellectual of the time, said that nothing short of a eugenic religion would save Britain from moral decline. We must never hesitate, he went on, to carry out the negative aspect of eugenics with considerable zest, both on the scaffold and on the battlefield. And these ideas went international. Scandinavians and Americans carried Galton's ideas back with them, so did Germans, who formed the Racial Hygiene Society. From the Bassettown Studbook to Auschwitz in not many bounds, Francis Galton's eugenics was among modern Britain's more doubtful exports.
Thankfully, at just the same moment, there were other thinkers at work. Saturday, the 7th of July, 1900, was a hot, sticky day in the narrow back streets of York. At first light, a shadowy figure stood holding a notebook, watching the door of a small, dirty pub.
By 6 a.m, people were already rattling the door of the public house. Everybody who went in, everyone who came out, was duly noted down in the little book. In all, 550 people went in, 113 of them children. Children simply abound here, the investigator wrote. I count no less than 13 sitting on the public house steps and the pavement.
The Observer was one of a team of private inspectors in an investigation into the living conditions of the poor. The project was the brainchild of a wealthy Quaker called Seabohm Rowntree, a member of the sweets and chocolate family.
As the inspectors delved deeper and deeper into the back streets of York, their anger and nausea began to smoke from the statistics and the dry notes. Dirty flock bedding in living room placed on box and 2 chairs, smell of room from dirt and bad air unbearable. Nearby, 16 families were sharing one water tap. The grating under the water tap is used for the disposal of human excreta and was partially blocked with it when inspected.
The rich had always blamed the poor for bringing poverty upon themselves by being idle or feckless. But Rowntree's study demonstrated in cold statistical fact that people slipped into poverty for many different reasons.
The poor were victims. They weren't genetic failures. They were women without an income who'd been widowed or deserted. They were people broken by ill health or old age, unable to work, or they were in work but simply weren't being paid enough to keep themselves and their families decently. Rowntree's book, published in 1901 and called simply Poverty, is among the most important things written by a British person in the 20th century. It set thinking Britain alight.